Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Good morning, everybody. Good Friday morning, everybody. I almost missed the chance to say that, despite the fact that I remembered to put that in the Morning Post. And I actually thought last night about making the Morning Post to say, Good Friday morning, everybody. Boy, I hope I don't forget between now and tomorrow morning to actually make that mention. And then I almost did. I knew I would. As soon as I know that I'm going to forget something before it's time to properly remember it, well, I'm pretty good at that prediction. I usually do manage to do that. It is Friday, March 30th, 2018. Good Friday for those of you who celebrate, and Meh Friday for those of you who don't. I don't know, I guess. When I was a kid, I think we used to actually get Good Friday off from school, and I don't think they do that anymore. Of course, we're off from school now because it's spring break. That's a pretty good excuse to give you Good Friday off. The kids, I believe, do have Easter Monday off, and Easter Monday isn't even a thing. I mean, Easter is Sunday. I know you want an extra day off, but why don't you just make that Good Friday? All right, well, anyway, schools in our area have stopped doing that. I don't know how it is back in New Jersey where I grew up, but here in Virginia, the kids are off, and spring break is screwing me up. It's keeping things difficult in the morning. I mean, I like it. It's nice, and the kids certainly enjoy it. But I try and take the opportunity to get up a little later since I don't have to make the kids breakfast, and I don't know, it just screws me up. And then I remember, I have a radio show, and I have to run over here. And I got started a few seconds late, and then I thought, okay, well, it occurred to me for the first time in, how long have we been doing the show? 5 years? Perhaps 6 years? That when I start the show late, although this is a late occurring thing, is that as I'm now preparing the podcast, the tapes, as it were, of the show for possible use later as reruns, even though I refuse to use reruns in the Trump era, generally speaking. It screws everything up. It screws all the timing up, especially if I'm trying to prepare tape to be used in to sync with our automated breaks during the show. It matters, how the timing lines up, and therefore what time I hit the start button on all of my various gadgetry here. And if I screw up and I miss my early cue and bring in the bridge music a little bit late, it sets everything back, and I got to make up time later. And then I thought, today was the first time, literally, that I thought, why don't I turn down the bridge music early and then just start the show open music at 9:01 as properly scheduled? Huge innovation. And so maybe now I will solve the problem that's been plaguing me, that I thought I would turn to Twitter for an answer for, but why would you ever turn to Twitter for an answer for anything? More minutia. I need to tell you this before we talk about the world's going to explode, or President Trump is the worst president ever, and he's going to end our Constitution, and John Bolton might kill us all, or Roseanne Barr might have a funny television show. I don't know what we're supposed to do about that one. More minutia, but my Twitter morning has been consumed with this. I have recently switched over from, it's not even that recent, coffee to tea, largely in the mornings, thinking, less caffeine. And that's true. I looked it up. There's less caffeine in the tea, and that's generally speaking pretty good for you. And tea's all right, I'm not a huge fan, but okay, a little bit of caffeine, it's hot, beverage, morning thing. It seemed like a good substitute at the time. And I went back so I'm drinking tea for the first time since I don't know when. And everything's going swimmingly, and I find a kind of tea that I like, and it's Irish breakfast tea, which sounds a little dumb, but like I knew there was English breakfast tea, and I didn't realize, I guess I should have guessed. Irish, we're going to have our own breakfast tea. I'll show you. I don't even know if that's Irish sounding. Anyway, maybe Lucky Charms sounding, but So we have this Irish breakfast. It's fine. I could do with any tea. It doesn't matter. I'm not a tea connoisseur. And we had this nice stuff from the supermarket. I was in Trader Joe's the other day. They have the same style of tea. All right. I'll get the Trader Joe's kind. I got home and I found out, all right, well, the Trader Joe's one is not packed. The little tea bags don't come individually wrapped in their little own packages the way is it Twinings was the other kind of tea that we had? Fancy stuff, I guess. And I thought, okay, Trader Joe's, environmentally conscious, whatever. It comes in, 2 packages of wrapped plastic trays, which I guess are not that particularly good for the environment, but supposedly I guess you recycle the plastic trays. And, if you use the tea up I don't know if tea goes stale because it's not individually wrapped or anything. Who cares? I figured it's good for the environment. They also have no strings on the tea bags, which I also guessed was why have all that string in landfills or whatever. And so I thought, okay, fine. And first day with the tea comes, and I'm brewing the stuff, and I take the teaspoon and I fish out the tea bag. No problem. There's no string on this thing. You don't really need that. And I now have this steaming hot, wet tea bag, and I don't know what to do with the thing. I think I realized what the big problem is. Normally, so I don't know whether everybody does this. I learned, I guess, from my mom making tea. I saw her do it. She would fish out the tea bag there, usually using the string, put it on the spoon, and then you wrap the string around the back of the spoon and over the top of the tea bag, and you pull the string, and that squeezes the excess water out and maybe a little bit extra tea flavor or whatever into your cup. And then you can toss the tea bag relatively dry in the trash. But now I have these sopping wet and very hot tea bags. And the first day I was like, all right, I'll press it with my thumb. I don't mind getting my thumb a little dirty, but it's actually blazing hot. That's not going to work. So then I thought, all right, I'll just toss the tea bag right into the trash. But it's super wet and hot, and it's just, I don't know, it makes a big mess and soaks into everything. And now I have this brown, somewhat smelly and wet and hot garbage sitting in the house. And I don't like that. I like to let things dry out to the extent that I can before I toss them in the trash. Maybe I'm being too picky. I don't have a composter or a compost pile. We live in a townhouse. There's nowhere to put it, nowhere to put the compost, nothing to grow with it anyway. Should I be composting anyway and giving all my compost to farmers? That might be a little much to get done before the start of the show. You can see my problem. So some other people said, use a second spoon, but that seems like a waste. I'm trying to help out here. Of course, burning my fingers isn't doing any good for anybody either. Somebody suggested, you fish it out with a spoon and you press it against between the back of the spoon and the side of the cup. And then you put it on the saucer. And I realized, now that's where I'm departing from cultured tea drinkers. I'm making it in a mug and I don't have a saucer. That's very, I don't know, low class of me. I should be using the saucer. And if I had the saucer, I would put the tea bag on there. It could dry out in there, cool off in there. And that would solve everything. So I just need to be more cultured, I think. That's probably the problem. No saucer is, that's very low class coffee drinker of me to be using a mug and no saucer. So that's probably it. That's the insight for the day. Matthew Rigdon has this to add. I imagine the first English breakfast tea bag was an Irish one that they had stolen half of. A little European political commentary. Never heard anyone. It's certainly more relevant to what we're supposed to be doing on the show than, my tea bag is too hot. And now I've really ruined the whole morning show feel of this thing. I knew this would eventually land on me saying something about tea bags and regretting it first thing in the morning. I knew I should have just stayed away from this the whole time. But everybody wants to know if I'm born in a barn or something, because it was a weird assumption people began to make, what are you, an idiot? You take the tea bag out of the teacup with your fingers? Are you a barbarian? No, I have the spoon. I just don't have the string. What am I supposed to do? And Matthew Wheel, so there's a whole complicated, we're now going to do 2 hours of the tea bag, everybody. Matthew Whelan, yes, thank you. Sullivan Street, tweeting at Sullivan Street, says, squeeze it between the spoon and the side of the sink. And I have a too fancy copper sink that doesn't like weird stuff in it. I don't know. My wife liked this copper sink. It's very annoying. All right, I give up. I'm going to go on a starvation diet and get rid of the sink. And that's that. I'll go back to coffee. I have this nice iced coffee now anyway. It's summer, or it's warming up. It's spring. It was a nice warm day yesterday. I should just switch to that. Okay. And very good. I think that's going to have to be it. And Matthew Rigdon, very fancy, has loose leaf tea. And I guess you have one of those items that I've seen the tea balls and the tea. Oh, look at that. This is a nice brewing teapot with a little strainer that sits in there. That seems a little bit much for me to maintain in the morning. So anyway, very good idea, and very bad idea for me to switch from coffee to tea. We're now done with that, I think. The other thing that seems to be consuming the morning on Twitter is, what if Roseanne Barr has a television show and she's pro-Trump and the show is not terrible? What are you going to do? I don't know what I'm supposed to do about this. I wasn't a big fan of the last Roseanne show, not because I thought it was terrible, but because I was like, why am I going to sit here when I have so much work to do elsewhere and watch television? So I don't know if I'm supposed to be upset about that, but here's my position on this. I'm okay if Roseanne Barr has a television show, and some people like it. I think, until she gets really crazy, I'm just not going to have very much to say about that one. Let's see. On the other hand, something else that consumed a little bit of my time, I don't know how we got to it, but I happened to just see Atrios tweeting about it, and I said, oh yeah, hey, I've thought about that too. In the continuing raging debate on Twitter over what is journalism that resulted from, I guess, one of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas student newspaper editors found herself on CNN some days ago, framed in the picture on either side by CNN anchors in a debate over the nature of journalism with this teenager, this girl who was stuck in the middle of the two anchors, who I guess are yelling at her about, you don't understand what journalism is, because you think journalism is a form of activism. And you are obviously out of your gourd because you think that it's okay to take a positive position of some sort in your journalism. And that has started a raging debate via Twitter and elsewhere over what is, in fact, the nature of journalism. Is it a form of activism? Should it be a form of activism? Is activism that thing where you have an opinion about something and nothing more, nothing less? I don't know. But the debate has been somewhat interesting, and I guess Josh Krashar had something to say about it and was just generally incensed that anyone would think that journalism is anything other than a straight, objective presentation of the facts and nothing else. And those of us who are on the more liberal side of the spectrum from Josh, because we think in terms of nuance, immediately begin to think, doesn't it matter what facts you decide to present? Or more expansively, I did see a number of other journalists say interesting things like, all of us who are working in, say, investigative journalism, we love more than anything spending a year digging through archives and contacting sources and exhaustively documenting our facts so that when we print our objective facts that aren't supposed to push anybody to action of any kind because it's so objective, we love it when people say, wow, what an interesting discovery that you dug up and exposed to light, and then walk away from it. Investigative journalism. It's certainly journalism, and it absolutely begins with the intent of moving people to some kind of action. But I don't know whether that's not activism in the view of people like Josh, or a different kind of journalism, or whatever. Anyway, I saw Atrios pointing out this morning his, as he puts it, my pithy tweet-sized take on all of this is, well, the way he put it, why when most Americans, most people just don't own stock, why is constant update on the condition of the stock market, or indeed, as I've sometimes wondered, the live stock ticker that occupies 20% or so of the screen on any cable news network around the clock, why is that news? Like, it is a fact. Those are the stock prices. Are they news? Do they absolutely need to be there? And I can understand now that, and I've wondered, in other words, chicken and egg situation. Is the Dow Jones Industrial Average news because of something inherent in it? Even if people don't need to know, is it news because we've come to think of it as news because it's on the news channels? Is it news because, okay, maybe most Americans don't own individual stocks, but certainly lots of Americans own mutual funds, etc., that are stock-based, or even have funds that are indexed to the Dow. And so I guess people are somewhat interested in day-to-day finding out what the Dow is doing. And even the fact, even if the Dow is doing nothing in particular, okay, is that shorthand in newspeak for, everything's on a relatively even keel, nothing weird is happening. If the Dow is plunging or the Dow is screaming through the roof, something is happening, and you should look around for what it is, maybe, I don't know. But I guess the question is, which came first, and which one is the chicken and which one is the egg here? I wondered whether stock tickers or constant updates on the Dow was a Reagan era product, or whether it was just, it wasn't so much an outgrowth of the Reagan era and the Reagan approach to everything as it was the fact that cable news was a Reagan era invention. And so I invented 24/7 news on cable networks now, and I need to fill the screen with something. And the stock ticker, it is news, and it probably would be considered relatively objective news by most people, even if it isn't relevant to their lives. And only as I saw in my feed today, only the Noam Chomskys of the world would be objecting publicly and semi-loudly, as loudly as Noam Chomsky was permitted to protest, I guess, about that, or, as loudly as people were willing to hear him, if you can hear something loudly. The idea that, this is serving our corporate masters or whatever. I don't know how he put it, because I'm not a Chomsky reader anyway, but I'm vaguely aware of the sorts of things that he writes about and the sorts of people who find that interesting and insightful, and I'm usually happy to talk to those people, even though I've never said anything to Noam Chomsky. Anyway, I was just sort of wondering whether that was, did it just fit the times, the Reagan era, and then we got used to that as a convention of news. That was also about the time that people did begin to buy in large numbers to mutual funds or retirement funds that were indexed to stuff like that, and I don't know whether that was a service to them, or it, the emergence of that kind of investment vehicle as a replacement for pensions or whatever, 401ks, etc. Did that, get accepted as news because, oh yeah, there really is a reason why I need to know this, or might somehow be interested in this, even if it doesn't change anything, even if the traffic and weather is a better use of my time than the stock ticker. But it was an interesting question for which I have no answer, but I have pondered that in the past. I wondered, maybe you have. Maybe you've got an answer about that, and you want to share that with the rest of us, like Matthew Rigdon clearly does. Matthew, you want to take over the rest of the show? This is great. I'm glad you're here to bounce things off of here. Let me take a look at this one. And there's another idea that we can jump to over there. Matthew's latest here. Wasn't the physical stock ticker one of the first news broadcasting devices? I think probably true. So it's something of a throwback to put the ticker on the screen. I think that's largely true, but that was a sort of a closed ecosystem. There were very few consumers of the physical stock ticker, and it went to people to whom it was actually immediately relevant. Why you would put that out to everyone, I don't really know. Why not police scanner transcripts? We should put that on the screen. That's relevant. I mean, we could just do that. Put one of those closed captioning machines that transcribes things as they're said on a local police scanner. And for now, we're going to look at the one in Kansas City. And I guess that's irrelevant to the rest of the country. Whereas stock prices really mean something. I don't know. I did also see it suggested, somebody said, well, this is something visual that creates the illusion of constant change and the need to constantly monitor things because things are constantly changing. And that may be the only source of news that actually works like that. But, yeah, and but I guess since you're talking about things being irrelevant to the rest of the country, like why wouldn't the police scanner activity in Kansas City be more relevant, probably to more people at any given time than, for instance, the current stock price of, the current price of Alcoa stock? What's Conagra doing right now? It's lost a penny. Oh my God. It's not any more relevant to the rest of the country than what's happening on the police channel in one city at a time, and rotate the cities. Matthew's second comment here. The first appearance on a TV screen may just have been because it was finally cheap enough and technologically possible to do. And that was likely it. I'm sure that the choice in Ted Turner's office, I guess, over whether or not to put that on CNN was just like, it's a visual element. It's clearly, relevant to somebody somewhere. Everybody knows it's news, by God. It had a ticker. And so therefore, and it is a throwback to old style something or other. I don't know. I'm not really sure why I doubt very much, for instance, that they got together and said, listen, this whole Reagan philosophy is something I'm really high on. And if we just give everybody financial news, they'll all become amateur economists, or they'll become, Reaganite, economy first sorts of political people. I don't think it was a conscious decision to try to push people into thinking, about, to create Alex P. Keaton world out there. It just, was a visual element that they wanted to add. But it does mean something that they stuck with that, and that was objectively, sure, that's newsworthy. Of course it is. It actually happened. But I guess more to Josh Kroshauer's point and Atrios's point is, okay, it's objective and it's true, but does anybody need to have that? And does anybody need to have that, at this level? Do you really need to know minute to minute what every stock trade is doing? You can't really know it anyway. So, and by the time it comes across the ticker, stock traders will probably tell you by the time you see it on the ticker, it's too late to really do anything about it anyway. By the time you see it on CNN and then run over to pick up the phone and call a brokerage office, too late. Anyway, let's see. CNN was all Trump programming. Matthew's got a lot to say. Back in 2016, no one stopped watching. Why feel bad now about Roseanne? Good question. Also, by the way, he says, God is telling me to drink coffee. That, I think, probably more relevant to a lot of people than the stock ticker. Speaking of Roseanne, good point here. I was wondering when we were going to get around to this one. Who's making this point? Kevin Schroff. Who is Kevin Schroff? Previously a digital organizer for Hillary Clinton, among other things. I assume, because that's all it says here, and Hillary Clinton isn't running now, so he's definitely doing something else. Kevin Schroff being retweeted. The reason it's in my timeline, Jen Hayden. Roseanne Barr grabbed her crotch while singing, very badly, the national anthem. Trump and Republicans love her. Kaepernick takes a knee in the name of justice. Trump attacks him, and the GOP continues to go after his livelihood. It's called racism. I think you may have something there. I was wondering when we were going to get around to, hey, why don't we hate Roseanne Barr for her stupid national anthem stunt? I didn't really care that much at the time, and I guess I don't care now either. But it's a good point in comparison to, rather respectfully, I think, taking a knee and being quiet during the national anthem rather than purposefully wrecking it and then grabbing your crotch. That would probably not go over so big now. Have times changed? Maybe. I don't know. Let's see. All right. Well, there's plenty of other things going on. I don't have to be, going on about what's happening with the world's stock tickers or tea bags. One last Matthew Rigdon comment. Matthew, I'm determined to join the show here today, and I really do appreciate it. I keep making that joke, but keep doing it. People in Dallas would have called and complained about seeing Kansas City's police feed nationwide. What makes them so special? That's true. Why the Dow Jones Industrial Average and not the Nikkei? I don't know. What makes us so special? Is it that we're American? Why not the American stock exchange listings? How come they don't do that? It is almost always New York Stock Exchange, isn't it? I mean, maybe now they do NASDAQ too. Does NASDAQ even have a ticker? I imagine they've got something that could be turned into a ticker. You can scrape the data from NASDAQ and turn it into a ticker, and there's a Chrome extension that'll do that for you. Maybe that's the modern version of these things. Well, I just got a nice big static pop in my ear. You can't take your sweatshirt off in the middle of the show and then toss it and then not get zapped. It's not a sweatshirt. It's a hoodie. It's a zip front, and apparently it's just not going to work, and you're going to get zapped in the ear this time. That really kind of hurt. All right, we made it all the way to the first break without discussing anything of any substance. All of you are, I'm sure, very happy about that. This first break, though, will give me an opportunity to fish through Pocket and pull out the items of relevance or things that I think you need to take with you, take forward into the weekend, even if it is a holiday weekend, that you can harangue people with during Easter services. Watch out, by the way, for accidental gun discharges during Easter services. It's a serious thing. I guess it's been about 3 years since 3 years since we learned about the one in Altoona, Pennsylvania, very literally during Easter services. So do be aware of that, and we'll catch up with that and then other relevant things in the next hour and a half. We'll be back in 2. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Good Friday morning, and welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So I have some other news that has nothing, I think, whatsoever to do with what I'm drinking in the morning. And that would explain an awful lot if I was drinking in the morning. Now you understand what's going on the show. Update for you on a briefly mentioned story, the bitter feud, the bitter Twitter feud between David Hogue, the student from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School down in Parkland, Florida, and Laura Ingraham, the person who has a show on some medium, who's a conservative idiot and who gives, Hitler salutes at the Republican National Convention, remarkably. She's switched positions, sort of. She's reversed herself. She's apologized in a way to David Hogue for bringing up the college admission situation on, again, whatever show on whatever medium it is that she's got. She noted the other day, and we noted that she noted the other day, that David Hogue had been rejected from 4 of the colleges to which he had applied, which doesn't really seem like a particularly relevant item since he, of course, applied to more than 4 colleges, has been accepted at some good colleges, and doesn't have a problem of any kind. I don't know why she brought that up. She was just trying to be mean, and she was fishing for, I guess, anything to discredit him, which is really the bigger story. Why bother discrediting a student who survived a school shooting and is mad about school shootings? But that's where we are with the modern Republican Party, and there's lots to explore there, but that's old news. they clearly feel like it's a thing that they have to do. Undermine the claims of people who survived the situation, which is a bad situation for them politically because they're, of course, married to guns and the gun lobby, et cetera, et cetera. You all know the full background on that. Anyway, she's made an apology of sorts. I did happen to see somewhere along the line, people were retweeting, I guess, her comments on Twitter. And she was saying in the spirit of, I guess, of Holy Week, now that she's realized, oh my gosh, Good Friday is coming and Easter is coming and this is like the end of Lent and everything. And I was supposed to be doing, good things for humanity and for myself during all this time, and I forgot, but there are like 24 hours left. So in the spirit of that, I really shouldn't have done that, and I apologize. But of course, it developed that her apology was one of those "I'm sorry that people were offended" kind of things, apparently. And anyway, I guess on CNN, David Hogue was interviewed. He was asked, does he accept the apology? She says no. Or he says no, and the reason, the stated reason, she's only apologizing after a third of her advertisers pulled out, and I think it's really disgusting, the fact that she basically tried promoting her show after apologizing to me. Very interesting. So yeah, the boycott that we mentioned the other day, I guess, has been somewhat effective in the short time that it's been announced. I guess extremely effective in such a short time if she really lost a third of her advertisers. I did see a couple of advertisers decide to drop her show, so kudos there to David Hogue making use of that tool. I expressed my mixed feelings about it, but I'm happy to see that it worked out this way, and it's a proper response, I think, from advertisers. And so she's been properly, what shall we say, admonished, I guess, for that. And even if if that's what it takes to motivate her to realize that that was a kind of dumb thing to do, fine. That'll be okay with me. All right, let's see. What other things? Oh, look at this. I'm learning about a new Daily Kos design tweak right now because I, like you, if I just opened up my Daily Kos front page, I will have just seen this thing. I had no advance notice of it because I don't pay attention to anything. Daily Kos design tweak, eh? What's the design tweak? I see some blue stuff. Oh, look at this. Say hello to Community Blue. As you've probably noticed, I hadn't. We've tweaked Daily Kos' design a bit, creating color distinctions between staff, which are orange, and community, which appear in blue letters. I guess the headline and then a designation of community or staff underneath your username when you post a diary. I wonder if I'm staff. I don't know. I think so. I think that's kind of where I end up and all that. But it doesn't. Yeah, there's not always an easy way to tell from the perspective of the person. Me, am I staff? I'm not an employee. I don't work in their office. It's hard to tell, but I think I would be counting as staff, as a contributing editor. Anyway, so very interesting. And by the way, they also have upgraded the share buttons. I am not certain how or why or in what way. Maybe they're larger. Is that what it is? They look bigger. So exciting developments on that front. And I'm learning about it as you're learning about it by opening up the front page. So that's what I'm saying. Like, am I staff if I don't know that ahead of time? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not design staff, so that doesn't do anything for me. All right, really, I swear to God, there's news going on out there that's important to you for various reasons, and I thought I might share some of it with you. Here's one. We try and do we got to hit some of the big stories just to get our commentary in on it and give you a chance to chime in with your commentary too. But then one of the things I love about the show is little bits and pieces of news that might not made it to your radar yet. They're not new because I dug them up. They've been reported. It's just not, quote unquote, being reported widely because only one or two people have written about it. And later on, when we talk about it, we'll spread the news. You and I, we're the trendsetters as far as I'm concerned. Christina Bellatoni with this piece. Where's Christina writing these days? I forget. LA Times. And previously has been a roll call reporter, a TPM reporter, Washington Times reporter, too. That's a mixed bag, by the way. She's kind of an interesting figure in that sense. Anyway, she reports this story. California voters are rejecting parties. Understandable. But a bunch of them are joining a right-wing fringe party by mistake. No one is doing anything about it. And you know that no one should do anything about it because she's a reporter, a journalist, and she's being totally objective, and she's just telling you the facts, and you're not supposed to feel one way or the other or do anything one way or the other about it. It is simply objectively true that California voters are rejecting parties, and that might not really be objectively true, but a bunch of them are joining, objectively, a right-wing fringe party, objectively, by mistake, objectively. There's a lot of objectivity in this. And no one's doing anything about it except writing an article about it that puts it in exactly this light, which, of course, is not activism. I don't know where she comes down on that debate, but it would be semi-interesting to spend about 4 seconds talking to Josh Krashar about it, and then he would answer, and I would lose all interest in the discussion. Anyway, California voters are joining this party by mistake, but lawmakers aren't doing anything about it, and it's not even Christina Bellatone's doing this story. It's John Myers' story, and she's just tweeting about it, but they're both from the LA Times, and that's why she's tweeting about it, I guess. Here's the deal. 2 years ago this month, the Times, the LA Times, investigated one of the longest lingering questions in California politics. Are some voters mistakenly joining a political party when what they really want is to be an electoral free agent? And is that one of the longest lingering questions in California politics? I would have thought that, like, maybe taxation. Just throwing that out there as a possibility. Proposition, whatever the hell it is. If I were Californian, I would know right off the bat. And the history of, oh my God, taxes, yada, yada. And Californians know what I'm talking about. They're just not awake yet. When you get up later and listen to this podcast, you'll say, prop, blah, 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 everybody. Well, how do you people not know this? And it's like, there's the rest of the country out here. And that's why they say coastal elites, not just eastern elites. You know, you elitist West Coasters. I don't know. Anyway, the answer seems to be yes. That's good to know. Have you all forgotten the question? Because I blabbed about something about the West Coast. The question, supposedly the longest lingering question, one of them in California politics was, are some voters mistakenly joining a political party when they really meant to be independents? The answer seemed, but now it's changed, I guess, to be yes, with substantial evidence of citizens who thought they were an unaffiliated independent voter, but instead registered with the American Independent Party. And no, those aren't the same thing. I believe that is an easy mistake to make. Well, I wouldn't make it, but I believe that is a mistake that gets made by a lot of people who really, genuinely do think, oh yeah, I want to be an independent. Others, and I think that's why they put that in there. The word independent in the middle of the party. I think they knew that they were going to capture some people by mistake. What does it matter? I suppose the article will spell that out for you, but you've probably already guessed at some of it. The American Independent Party was organized 50 years ago in California to boost the presidential candidacy of former Alabama Governor George Wallace. Some of you probably already knew that. That might not been your guess about why that's important now, because, of course, Alabama Governor George Wallace, not himself a threat anymore. Anyway, he, of course, best known for his support of segregation. Current party leaders insist those days are long gone, focusing now on a platform opposed to abortion and same-sex marriage, while praising the Second Amendment and border security. In other words, it's the Republican Party. In 2016, the party joined Republicans in nominating Donald Trump for president. So there's all the proof that you need and exactly how that came to be. More than 500,000 Californians are now registered as members, it should be, but as a member, that's what it says. Now that's really interesting. More than 500,000 Californians are now registered as a member of the American Independent Party. So no problem, because there's only one member of the American Independent Party. It's, in fact, 500,000 people in conglomerate. 500,000 squirming Californians under a trench coat I guess, all stacked up on the world's tallest independent voter. But the joke's on you. You're not independent. You're a member of the American Independent Party. You are, in fact, a party member of some party. Anyway, the AIP's share of first-time registrants since 2017 is more than 3 times the size of any other minor party, even as the AIP's website still showcases information from 2016 and has no statewide candidates this year. All the while, its leaders continue to boast of it being, quote, the fastest growing political party in California, which has come at the same time that more Californians are rejecting parties outright and registering as, quote, no party preference voters. That's how you become an independent in California. No party preference, not by joining the American Independent Party. And, so, beyond bragging rights, if that's what you call it, about being the fastest growing political party in California, there are surely other benefits that make this a serious situation. I have some in mind, and I imagine, I don't know what California ballot access laws are like, but I imagine that if you have a certain number of party members statewide, you might have an easier time getting a ballot line. And you might even, who knows, in California, you might even get some sort of matching funds to run your candidates, etc. We'll see what the LA Times has to say about this. Unless it's if it's just bragging rights, then I guess it's not a big deal, but you do want truth in advertising if you can get it, to the extent that you can have it. If you can't bully the American Independent Party into a truth in advertising situation, then what good is politics, really? The American Independent Party has maintained official recognition by the size of its registration. There you are. Asked for a comment via email. An AIP leader dismissed this column as, quote, another hit piece on us, and the idea of widespread voter confusion as speculative. In 2008, top state elections officials privately circulated a memo that suggested the legislature could pass a law banning party names with words such as American or United States or independent. It seems overbroad. I think if you just leave it to independent, you might get away with it, but you also might not. I don't think you can really ban a party from naming itself something unless, of course, I guess the FU party you could probably get away with a ban on if you spell the whole thing out, but I don't know if you can. Well, all right. Anyway, by the way, embedded in the article, if you're interested, if you are a West Coaster and just waking up tomorrow or whatever, and listening to the podcast, there is a link in here that says, are you an independent California voter? Not if you checked this box, and it takes you to a picture of the registration form and say, if you check this thing thinking you were registering as an independent, you're not. And I imagine, hopefully there's a little thing here that will tell you what to do if you have registered with the wrong party and want to change that, and how you can go about doing it. Anyway, the litmus test for a change in the law as proposed by the legislature, either banning certain party names or whatever, the litmus test would be applied when the party renewed its official status after each gubernatorial election. The goal, the memo said, would be to, quote, reduce or eliminate the number of people who think they're registering as an unaffiliated voter. But such limitations are real, but they are rare. Wyoming, for example, has long banned the word independent in the name of any new political party. So they've gotten away with it up there. I wonder how much testing that one's had in the federal courts, if any. California, though, bans only names that are, quote, so similar to the name of an existing party as to mislead the voters. A regulation that's silent on the potential pitfalls for voters who refuse to join a party. It's a good point. Confusion has been reported by Californians from all walks of life. Students, celebrities, even the incoming owner of this newspaper. How embarrassing is that? Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, who is buying the Los Angeles Times and the San Diego Union Tribune, is a registered member of the American Independent Party. A spokesman says it was a mistake, and Soon-Shiong is changing his status to, quote, no party preference. Imagine he probably did that like in preparation for buying the newspapers. I want to be neutral officially. And that's not a good sign, is it? I'm so politically savvy. I know that when I'm buying the Los Angeles Times and the San Diego Union Tribune, people want their journalists to be neutral and objective, like Josh Krashower says. So I'm going to register as an independent. And then I screwed up and I registered for a right-wing fringe party. And I don't know whether people are supposed to be alarmed at the possibility that you meant to join it, or should they be alarmed at the possibility that you really just didn't know what the hell you were doing and made that kind of a mistake. And you're supposed to be the guy. You're buying the newspaper because you think I don't know. I mean, maybe you're just buying it as an investment, but presumably you think you're a savvy guy when it comes to the news, and that you can do a better job bringing it to people than the current ownership. I don't know. That is a little weird. Anyway, the issue caught fire in 2016 when unaffiliated California voters were invited to cast ballots in the Democratic presidential primary. Aha! Here's an issue. Those who discovered on Election Day that they were in the American Independent Party were out of luck. One Santa Cruz County AIP voter balked, successfully persuading a judge to let her switch affiliations and cast a ballot. That's another important thing. I had forgotten all about that one. Sacramento lawmakers have largely dismissed the issue for years, either over concerns about forcing a name change or because, as Democrats and Republicans, they're not that worried about non-party voters. And so voter education may be the only solution, including more clarity in voter registration materials. Political data researcher Paul Mitchell, not the hair care product guy, happen to have seen that advertised on TV, so I think that's the name of the hair care products, but he might be both. I don't know. It is California. Political data researcher Paul Mitchell, perhaps California's most impassioned critic on the issue, used to send AIP voters a card on April Fool's Day. Oh, see? Timely, too. To show them what they'd done. That's a very clever idea, even though it will incense a lot of them. Anyway, with that annual celebration now upon us, it might be worth logging on to the Secretary of State's website to check your status. And that is linked herein, by the way, if you wanted to. If you're an early riser in California and you want to do it right now, that is to say at 9:49 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time and 14.7 o'clock Pacific Springoid time. What do you call it? It's the same thing. I know. You can go to, it's an HTTPS. Obviously, it's a secure website, but go to voterstatus.sos, Secretary of State. Not like, oh my God, help me. I'm registered as an American Independent Party member. Voterstatus.sos.ca. It's California for the rest of us. .gov. It's not Canada, as we sometimes do with the .ca. It ends in .gov, so it's an American domain. Voterstatus.sos.ca.gov. And you can check and see, am I one of those dopes that signed up as American Independent Party, thinking I was registering as independent? And that if you were an intentional registrant to the American Independent Party, probably not listening to the program. Chances are there are 0 accidental members of the American Independent Party listening to the show, too, because, well, 1, like I said, they're not awake yet, and 2, we're all pretty conscious. Not all of us are Democrats, of course, but we're all pretty conscious of what party we intended to register. Maybe you made a mistake. You can check it out. Maybe you know a friend or neighbor who you think is particularly dumb, but you're friendly with them anyway, or there's nothing you could do about them buying a house next to you, who you think signed up for the American Independent Party. And you can let them know. Voter, so you won't remember. Voterstatus.sos.ca.gov. Okay. Or you can just look at our afternoon post that Scott Anderson will prepare for us. Thank you very much every time, Scott. And you can read the LA Times piece therein linked and get all the way down to the bottom, and you can figure out what the hell you're supposed to do about this thing. He didn't put it up top because he's not an activist. He's a journalist. Remember. Okay, let's see. Catching up on various other things here. Oh, yes, thank you very much, Matthew Rigdon, coming to our rescue again. Prop 13 is that California thingy that I was trying to come up with the name of and couldn't remember what the number was. And let's see. Also, they drag up this American Independent Party thing each election. Is that right? Frankly, if people don't read, what can you do? Not that much, but you remind them every once in a while. And therefore, sometimes 4 people fix that thing. He says he's an AIP member who listens so he can understand the enemy. All right, Matthew. Fine. You go on. You make light of the fact that people are misregistered that way. And then when they show up, well, you know what? Here's where it concerns me. 4 or 5 people. I'm sure that this is all that's really happening to, but I doubt there were even that many, but who knows? I wouldn't want to have to be the one to explain, let's say, to people when they show up and say, I want to vote for Bernie Sanders in the California primary. And the poll workers say, I'm sorry, you can't vote in the Democratic primary because you're registered as a member of the American Independent Party, not the Democratic Party. And either out of ignorance or because they're incensed that they're being told no and not quite having it sink in, or because they genuinely believe such dumb things, they immediately start shouting about this. I told you, see, Bernie was right. It's rigged. The Democrats are keeping me out and blah, blah, blah. And then you explain to them, well, you registered as American Independent Party, and that's not the same thing as no party affiliation. You misregistered. And, I can just imagine then the argument coming back. And it doesn't have to be a Bernie person. Anybody could make the same mistake and then resort to the same excuse later. Well, this must be why, although this would be sort of uniquely, I would say it would be unique to people who really truly believe that they wanted to be independent of any of the parties. This is why the 2 major parties are so useless, both in Washington and in Sacramento. Why this has come up annually, and why don't they do something about it? And the reason they don't do something about it is it's in the interest of the 2 major parties to keep independents confused and divided. And there might even be something to that, but really it's just who effing cares? Read the form and everything will be fine. But, you'll have to deal with somebody like this every once in a while, I'm sure. Let's see, a couple other comments have come in during the show as well. Let's see. Michael Musson pointing out, let's see, your discussion of your tea dilemma led me down the rabbit hole of this interesting article. See, it can lead to anything. It is interesting, but I don't think you'll find it helpful. Okay. That's a very good distinction. I'm just curious now what it is. You sold it to me so well. Let's see. Over on atlasobscura.com, which sounds like a very interesting website. The forgotten drink that caffeinated North America for centuries. Oh, not just tea, but Yaupon tea, Yaupon, Yaupon. A botanical cousin to yerba mate is now almost unknown. It is interesting how we've thrown staples, food staples, and all sorts of other practices overboard as new things, or I guess maybe standardization for marketing purposes has edged niche products out, just generally speaking. So I bet that would be an interesting article. Interesting, but not helpful, probably true. Do you guys want to see it? Should I include it in the roundup? I'll give it to Scott, and maybe we could throw it in there. Now that I've mentioned it, if I were listening, I'd be like, okay, I mean, I do want to move on to something else, but what about that tea thing? But I've given you the spelling, so you could just Google it. Forget it. All right, by the way, there's a little bit more here. Maureen adds for us, how does... ... You know how that's going to end. How does Hope Hicks? How does she do it? Hope is gone from Trumpville, leaving behind an internecine fight to get the vacated role. She attaches here the Guardian's coverage of Hope Hicks's final the grand finale, the season finale of the Hope Hicks season of Trumpville, saying her goodbyes at the White House and getting a kiss and a firm handshake, perhaps, from the President of the United States, treated as front page news in some places. No one really cares about Hope Hicks. No one knows how she does it, though. That is the lingering question. So that's out there, too. By the way, I don't mean to be ignoring the comments coming from our friend Chief Beef Loco, although sometimes I have to skip by them because they're like information dense, and in my first glance I can't tell exactly what we're on here, but we're caught up on the show here. Let's see. I see the mention of Orange County in here. So are we talking California politics again? If you had to live in Orange County for more than a few minutes, you'll know how the landlord class are literally enamored with financialized money sauce / no work income train. Okay, we're talking about CNN and their stock ticker, probably. They're buffered from reality in their landlord class bubble, so they don't think, and that's probably largely true. And one more comment that he had made, showing stock ticker as a service to the landlord class, right? Who's trying to convince us that financialization of everything to austerity levels is a good idea, along with privatization of everything. The ticker lets us make the great in-your-face Mnuchin burn graphics. And, of course, his fantastic Photoshops accompanying that one. A good point, and I think largely on the same page with what we were thinking and talking about when we were on that subject the first time around. So glad to have your contribution on that one. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, it certainly could be viewed as a subtle indoctrination and financialization ideology. And, trying to see if they can get everybody on the same page and considering that to be news. And that'll give you a different perspective on the world. How insidious. We'll be back in 1 minute. Go look at the stock ticker. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Wake up, everybody. Those of you West Coasters lingering over your party registration online to see whether you accidentally signed up with the American Independent Party. I hope not. Let's see, one other additional comment, and a fine one again from Matthew, saying, I feel sorry for the poll workers. It's probably high up on the list of stupid things, well, anything, but I would have had stupid things, but things that poll workers get yelled at for no good reason. Each election cycle, probably people show up and argue with them about whether or not they really are enrolled as members of the American Independent Party or not. I suppose it's possible, by the way. Well, probably not. It's probably all handled by... What do you think? Do you think there's any possibility that there's any coding errors at any point? Like, what if you signed up and you hit no party preference and the person entering the data, like a temp maybe, hired to enter that data in the computers at the Secretary of State's office, confuses it and hits the American Independent Party button because they come up sooner in the scrolling list than no party preference? I don't know how, what the user interface is like for that thing. What if that happened? Wouldn't that be something amazing if that were the case? Yet more suggestions, still more suggestions coming in about what to do with those tea bags, by the way. Let's see. That's a nice suggestion. Brian Robison, I guess. There's no N in there. It's not Robinson. We keep a small decorative plate by the kitchen sink. Leave wet tea bag there for a day to dry before putting in a compost bin. Of course, lots of reminders that I should be composting, although where I would put that compost, both while it's composting and when I'm finished with it, I still have no idea. I suppose you could I've seen in catalogs those little barrels that are on a stand you can turn over very easily and turn your compost, and people keep it maybe on the back porch or something. We could keep it outside of the kitchen. We have a sliding door out to a deck, but then I'd have a barrel full of compost that I could put in some place, I guess. I mean, we got a little teeny bit of land here, but I don't really do any planting. I could do it. Then I have to go and take out all my rotten garbage and mix it into my garden in the front. And I don't grow anything in it, so I feel like that's a waste of time. All right, moving on. Let's see. More news. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's a new one. I'll have to see about that one. Did we cover this one? I don't think we talked about it on the air, but let me open up that tweet and just hold on to that one for later. I got a couple other stories I wanted to bring to your attention for Friday and for weekend discussion. Let's click on over to the next thing in Pocket here. Milo Yiannopoulos news of sorts. Kate Sherrill, I think, sent me this piece from NBC News to the surprise of no one. Milo Yiannopoulos' charity for white boys. Do you remember this thing? A while ago, he thought it would be trolly and funny to start a sort of like an anti-diversity college grant thing. Like there's no, he of course believes there's no college scholarships for white males. It's only for minorities. Of course, that's not true, and it's also not the case that white males are having any difficulty vis-a-vis other minorities or genders in getting into college or finding financing for college. It's kind of tough for everybody, but you know, he is how he is. He's trolling. Okay, I'm going to start a college fund, a college scholarship fund, and the only people who can receive assistance from it will be white males because LOL YOLO, I'm trolling you, something. Well, anyway, all right, fine. You want to waste your life and waste your money doing that? Fine. Only, of course, he's not going to waste his money doing that. He's going to steal the money, and it's a scam. But do we care if he's stealing the money from the kind of people that would donate to such a thing? I don't know. But to the extent that you could imprison Milo Yiannopoulos, I guess we care about that. That would be a good thing. Milo Yiannopoulos' charity for white boys winds down as mystery remains over the $100,000 raised. I will suggest to you right here and right now, there is no mystery. That money is stolen because the fund was, the quote-unquote fund, was quote-unquote administered by, not quote-unquote, thieves. So the money's stolen. It's gone. It's spent already, and Milo was wearing it. And maybe he paid some of it to his lawyers to blow on that other lawsuit that fell apart with the publishers. The subheader here, the self-styled provocateur started the charity to help white men, and that's in scare quotes, interestingly enough, pursue secondary education. Man, you should really get that primary one taken care of if this is what you're wrapping yourself up in. All right, Brian Zadrozny wrote this piece for NBC News. We'll see if we can buzz quick through it and see if there's anything else interesting to pick out other than the news that Milo Yiannopoulos has absconded with your money, if you were foolish enough to give any to. And I don't even know whether anybody gave anything. That probably didn't happen either. A charity meant to provide college scholarships for white men, started by Milo Yiannopoulos, self-described libertarian, and professional internet troll, has shuttered its operations, and it had no operations, really. Yiannopoulos confirmed to NBC News, after 2 years and multiple scandals that included allegations from former employees of mismanagement, the most basic details of the $100,000 Privilege Grant Foundation Fund. Its donations, disbursements, and scholarship winners, if any, I would add, remain a mystery. Its failure is just the most recent in a string of setbacks that have derailed the self-styled provocateur who was once one of the, who was one of the earliest and most notorious figures inside the so-called alt-right conservative movement. At present, the Privilege Grant is not accepting new applications or donations, Yiannopoulos said in a statement sent by texts to NBC News. What started as a social experiment that also did some good, winding up social justice warriors, while also sending poor kids to college, yeah, right, became fodder for disingenuous, mouth-breathing, he says, retards, and I resent the fact that he's able to say that, and I have to be embarrassed about thinking about saying that every time I talk about Donald Trump. Mouth-breathing, well, whatever. In the press, to baselessly accuse me of white nationalism. It's correct, of course. As a gay man happily married to an African-American. Yeah, right. I mean, come on. Whatever. I got tired of explaining to my husband why people on the TV kept calling me a racist, Yiannopoulos wrote. I doubt that happened either. His husband, to the extent that the guy actually exists, knows very well why they call him that. He just either doesn't care or he may disagree, but I don't think he needs an explanation. He probably understands it. It's because you're racist, but you're willing to be married to him. Okay, fine. You're just racist to everyone else. Public donations to the grant have been allocated to worthy recipients. I doubt it. I mean, I know they're not worthy, but I don't think there have been any recipients. And we are in the process of distributing the final awards, he told NBC News. So there's the answer. We haven't given any money out. We are also discussing what form future activities may take. None. And under whose leadership they might proceed. No one's. The grant remains a 501c3 charity in good standing with the IRS. Well, that could change. Yiannopoulos declined to provide details surrounding donations or disbursements and declined to answer follow-up questions on the record. Mystery money is the next section here. The scholarship fund was launched in January 2016 by Yiannopoulos, then a technology editor at Breitbart News. Don't forget that. And billed as, quote, exclusively available to white men who wish to pursue their post-secondary education on equal footing with their female, queer, and ethnic minority classmates. Because it's so hard. At the time, Yiannopoulos said that the scholarships would be paid for by himself and other private donors, but declined to detail for NBC News both how much money he had contributed, zero, and raised for his charity, zero. In 2016, he told the Daily Beast there was between $100,000 and $250,000 in the fund's coffers. There were probably not. If there was, he's stolen it since then. Yiannopoulos also declined to provide information on the number of recipients, zero, or their identities, no one. In January 2016, Yiannopoulos told Breitbart News, and they believed him because that's their job, that he planned to give out 50 grants. In a later fundraiser, a 5-hour #MiloGivesBack live stream, Yiannopoulos said the grants would number 100. By August of 2016, the same summer that he was permanently banned from Twitter for harassing Ghostbusters actress Leslie Jones, Yiannopoulos still hadn't handed out a dime, provided a means for needy men to apply, nor even filed the necessary paperwork to become a recognized tax-exempt 501c3 organization. So that may have been a lie, that they were in good standing with the IRS. Might have just been a fabrication. And in fact, I guess if you say you're a 501c3, but there's really no such organization, can you credibly claim? You might be able to credibly claim, I'm in good, we are, as a nonprofit, in good standing as a 501c3 with the IRS. That is to say, the IRS has no basis for complaining about us because we don't exist. It's not that we are a 501c3 and they have no problem with the way we run. It's that we're not a 501c3 and they have no basis for proceeding against us because there's no such organization. Maybe that's all that's happening here. Let's see. After the foundation's director, right-wing gossip blogger Margaret McLennan, Lennan, I never heard of her, began tweeting allegations that donations to the fund were actually going to Yiannopoulos' pockets. A live stream participant demanded transparency over the, quote, tons of money raised during the telethon. And if that's really true, ha on you. And a report on his mismanagement of the fund was published in The Guardian. I guess it actually, was a thing. A later piece in Mike, M-I-C, the Mike magazine online, alleged the money had, quote, disappeared down a rabbit hole of private bank accounts and apparent shell companies. That's just called stealing it. Things looked bleak for the future of the Privilege Grant Foundation. Then, in December of 2016, it seemed Yiannopoulos had finally found a way to make his charity happen. He announced in a blog post that he had formed a partnership with a wealthy donor. Does his husband know about that partnership? That's just the way he operates, people. That's what I'm saying. A wealthy donor who had secured a, quote, top Washington firm, of what type, I don't know, willing to assist with the, quote, difficult and costly process of applying for federal nonprofit status. And I do think, when I say he stole the money, I assume that he tried his best to cover his embezzlement by saying it's administrative costs and I'm the administrator. An IRS spokesperson told NBC News the typical processing time for a 501c3 application is between 90 and 100 days, and the cost to file for federal tax-exempt status is between $275 and $600, depending on the form. I imagine that there's more expense involved in making the application if you have to get yourself legally in the right and you have to pay lawyers and accountants to help you do it, but still, it's not that costly a process. The new partnership seemed to work. Wow, what do you know? In January of 2017, 1 year after forming and allegedly raising money for his charity, Yiannopoulos announced that funds would begin flowing in the form of college scholarships to white low-income men. He said the $2,500 grants from the pilot program would go to far fewer than the 100 white men he had initially suggested, just 10 people. Still, he said the grants would help, quote, level the playing field. They wouldn't, but that's okay. I didn't really want it to be leveled. However, while things were finally going well for his foundation, maybe, they really weren't, Yiannopoulos' career was crashing down around him. In February of 2017, he was forced to resign from Breitbart after a video emerged online in which he seemed to endorse sex between older men and boys as young as 13. He quickly held a news conference where he apologized for the comments, saying he was horrified that anyone would think he supported pedophilia. But the damage was done, as it had been videotaped, of course. In the aftermath, the conservative CPAC conference disinvited Yiannopoulos from his speaking gig, and Simon & Schuster canceled the forthcoming publication of an autobiography, for which he had received a staggering $250,000 advance. That is rather staggering, don't you think? Who cares about his autobiography? Well, he just made a great deal, is all. While all of this was happening, Yiannopoulos' scholarship fund was being managed by an anti-feminist blogger who goes by the pseudonym Janet Bloomfield, also known on the internet as Judgy Bitch. Well, that's the name. Bloomfield, a small but vocal figure in the men's rights community, is known for her penchant for trolling feminists online. She was suspended from Twitter in 2016 after donning blackface, calling Beyoncé a feral thug, and warning the singer's fans that she would have them lynched. Well, that'll get you banned. Good person to have in charge of the funds if you want it accounted for honestly, right? Controversy aside, How can you set that aside? Objective journalism, ladies and gentlemen. Controversy aside, Bloomfield's appointment seemed to speed up the charity's operation, which, quite honestly, is about as close to, but the trains ran on time, as you can get in the context of administering a stupid Milo Yiannopoulos fund. Wow. Okay, so small-scale Hitler. I'm just saying, small scale. It's okay. Trying to give away money is actually really hard to do, Bloomfield told NBC News. It's hard to do that legally. And just the application process was a slog, she said. I went through 40,000 applications. What the problem is, it's not hard to give away money. It's hard to give away money donated by thieving scumbags to thieving scumbags for the purpose of dispersing it to other thieving scumbags. That's going to be difficult. I understand that. You're probably right about that. Okay, now winding down here, the final outcome. 3 months after the call for applications, the only tangible evidence of any disbursement is a post on the foundation's now defunct website that lists grant recipients by first name, college major, and state only, which means it's fake. Joe, a English major in Montana, totally got a grant from us. Sure. Of course. A big lie. A request for further identification of winners was denied, with both Yiannopoulos and Bloomfield citing privacy for the grant recipients. By the way, I mean, it is an interesting question. I was wondering along the way, what would you do to find out who got these things? Like, would it be in the broader, is it in the public interest, the broad enough public interest to find out and publicly name the grant recipients who would take money from a Milo Yiannopoulos trolling fund? And is it possible that somebody was like, well, I don't agree with Milo Yiannopoulos, at all. I think he's an idiot, and I'd love to steal his money and use it to pay for my college education just so that it didn't go to anybody who really would listen to him. I suppose that could be a possibility, but I don't know. If you're smart, you'd stay a million miles away from this thing. On the other hand, I guess there was the possibility that no one is applying for this thing. So if I am from a white male who hates Milo Yiannopoulos and the alt-right and thinks it might be trolling to troll the trolls, and nobody would really be applying, and I might actually get some money, I would buy that as an excuse, though I'd have to see some contextual evidence that you were telling the truth about it. But I wondered whether it would be something you could dig out. Like, obviously, if they're a 501c3, surely they have to, essentially, they would have to have a bank account that could be monitored by the IRS, which monitors such things like your 501c3 designation, and we'd know what the name of the account was. And presumably we could, if not get a disclosure from them, we could go, enterprising investigative reporters, if they cared about this thing, could go school to school and ask, do you have any students who have signed over grants from this institution? I'm not really sure how it would work. I guess they could just simply send a check to the person and say, go cash this thing, and then use it to pay cash to your college for your tuition. I don't know whether it's really, if you're seeking to avoid being in the records, I guess it's possible. Anyway, a request for further identification of winners was denied, with both Yiannopoulos and Bloomfield citing privacy for the grant recipients. NBC News could not independently verify the awards. No person has ever publicly identified himself as a grantee because they're out and proud about their right-wing ties, right? And they have no reason to be embarrassed, except, curiously, no one has anything to say. So either the grants don't exist, or the people that they say they're granting money to don't really exist as loud and proud white nationalists anyway. No person has ever identified himself as a grantee. No foundation has yet to file an annual report into the IRS that might shed light on the fund's expenditures. In announcing the winners, Yiannopoulos also promised that a second round of grants would be made in 2017, but it seems that an additional set of Yiannopoulos scholars was never meant to be. It's a shame we had to wind things down, Yiannopoulos said in his statement. After the dust had settled on the joke, I realized there were tens of thousands of aspiring young men who could have benefited from the grant. So there's the admission we were looking for. It was a joke. And I only began to go down the road of raising money for the thing when I realized I might be able to raise some money and then steal that. And then I thought everybody would forget about it, and then they didn't. And now I have to come up with an excuse about what I did with the money. And the answer is I administered it into my pocket and spent it. And I'm wearing it right now. Anyway, he continues with his quote here. After the dust settled on the joke, I realized there were tens of thousands of aspiring young men who could have benefited from the grant. Screw all of them. That's why I committed money to it personally. No, you didn't. And through my management company. Maybe. But media reports deliberately misrepresenting the charity as an expression of alt-right neo-Nazism made fundraising and hiring impossible, because you're the secret silent majority, of course. I'm tempted to say, quote, I hope these reporters are proud of themselves, unquote, but sadly I know that they are, and they should be. Bloomfield told NBC News that despite the original mission, two of the recipients were not technically white. Noting that grants had gone to, they're just going to be open about this one. And again, these people don't exist. So they're making it up. They're like, what do I say to, what an interesting thing. They're just like, this reminds me a lot of Michael Cohen and now Michael Cohen's lawyers trying to make excuses for each question on the Stormy Daniels front as it comes up, regardless of the impact on the veracity of their previous answers. They just escape one question at a time. Well, aren't you giving out, isn't it racist for you to be giving out college grants exclusively to white males? Well, no, because, as it says here, two of the recipients were not technically white. What do you mean, not technically white? Well, grants had, they claim, gone to, quote, a half Asian and, quote, a young Orthodox Jew. End of quote, end of article. These people, I mean, please, if you're ever worried even for a moment about calling them deplorable, I absolve you. You are ready to go. You're good to go. You're cool here. All right. Let's see. What else have we got here? Oh, Matthew Rigdon chiming in again. Only $250,000 in the fund. So he was only going to provide a grant so white men could afford a parking pass at college. Yeah, that's about the size of it. Arliss Bunny chiming in, by the way, to say, oh, come on. Now you're implying some sort of relationship between rabbits and Milo. Rabbit holes are exclusive places, and given the upcoming weekend, especially busy. Yes, right, Easter. Milo is not now and never will be welcome in any of those rabbit holes. All right. Well, I was thinking he was another kind of hole, but rabbit hole is one that you could say on the air. And the other one, I think, largely isn't. All right, other important news. No, that's it for the important news. We'll get to the other little bits and pieces. Let's see. Where's these others? Here we go. There's a good one. Let's bring this one up for the corruption files. And by the way, good idea, I think. We've got all the fodder we need to bring back the old punchline that we hung on Republicans way back when. Culture of corruption. Do you remember our use of that line about Republicans? That might have been like from back in like 2006 elections. Was that it? Culture of corruption is back, and in a big way, as you know, in the Trump administration. Latest entry in the everybody is horrifically corrupt storyline. More about Scott Pruitt over at EPA, just to kind of get you caught up on the latest thing. ABC News reporting this one. John Santucci, Matthew Mosk, and Stephanie Ebbs on the byline. Exclusive, although now we're all going to know about it, so the knowledge will be less than exclusive. But digging it up was exclusively their work, allegedly. More cabinet trouble for Trump. I don't know. I don't think he's getting rid of this guy. EPA chief lived in condo tied to lobbyist power couple. What's happening here? I'll try and make it quick and dirty here. For much of his first year in Washington, President Trump's EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt, guilty of so many other ridiculous acts of corruption, now it is found he occupied prime real estate in a townhouse near the U.S. Capitol, usually very expensive real estate, that is co-owned by the wife of a top energy lobbyist. Property records from 2017 show. Sounds like a rather convoluted property ownership record to begin with, and that's usually a red flag about something. Co-owned by the wife of a top energy lobbyist. Not co-owned by the top energy lobbyist and the wife together, but his wife and somebody else co-own this thing. And among certain circles, I guess that's like not uncommon, and people do that sort of. It's not uncommon. And of course, there's nothing illegal about co-owning property with somebody else. And no, I'm not even casting aspersions on the relationship between this man's wife and whoever else might co-own. I think there's perfectly proper professional reasons for doing that. It's just that the class of people that deal with these things, you got to have enough money to be, involved in situations where you co-own properties that you don't live in with somebody who's not your spouse, and you have professional partnerships out there, and it's a moneyed class sort of a situation. Anyway, let's find out who they are. Neither the EPA nor the lobbyist, J. Stephen Hart, whose wife is the co-owner of this piece of property, would say how much Pruitt paid, if anything, to live at the prime Capitol Hill address, though Hart said he believed it to be the market rate. That means nothing. The price tag on Pruitt's rental arrangement is one key question when determining if it constitutes an improper gift, ethics experts told ABC News. And I think you can see what's happening at bottom here is what people are worried about is the possibility of a energy company lobbyist giving the EPA chief a sweetheart deal on a nice place to live in Capitol Hill in D.C. and maybe charging him nothing, or maybe charging him $10 a week, or maybe charging him even what they would call market rate, although it would in fact be well below the market rate. You'd have to find out. But it's certainly an opportunity to pull some improper influence on the EPA, and this EPA chief is looking for every opportunity to allow improper influence, probably in exchange for cash and gifts, so it's probably worth looking into. I'll scan it a little bit during the break and see if there's anything we can dig out. Just wanted to at least put that on your radar. That's the latest in scandals for Pruitt. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, our final segment for Friday. Let's see what else we can cram in there. I was scanning through the article just briefly, and it is rather interesting. Mostly, it's not going to be like groundbreaking news and blow your socks off here. Knock your socks off, blow you away, blow your socks off, knock your block sock, something, insert your own, terminology here. But it is interesting, and it's minutia, and I have a feeling that you might be interested in learning some of it, and some of these names may come up again in different contexts. It might be worth checking this out. What sort of people, I went on for some time about what sort of people get caught up in these sorts of situations, and I think we're right, and we'll find out a little bit about them and who they're associated with, and some of them will be surprises along the way. All right, so we left off basically at this part of the article. I think it certainly creates a perception problem, especially if Mr. Hart is seeking to influence the agency, EPA, said Bryson Morgan, who has the name of a person that's wrapped up in this sort of nonsense, but is in fact the former investigative counsel at the U.S. House of Representatives Office of Congressional Ethics. That's why there is a gift rule. Hart confirmed to ABC News in a brief interview that Pruitt had lived in the flat, very Euro of him to say, which is owned by a limited liability company that links to an address. Why people don't just say, I own this, I do. It's because they're trying to hide things and hide their liability for improperly gifting this stuff to elected officials or appointed government officials. The reason you do it, and not only that, I guess also maybe lowering their tax liability, but why you got to be so sneaky about whether or not you own the thing, there's no really good reason. There's only pretty much nefarious reasons. All right, but okay, so this woman enters into a real estate partnership whereby they're going to invest in a limited liability company to own some property, and I guess you form various LLCs. I mean, there is a legitimate reason to do it, right? If you're a property investor and you just want to own each property owned by an LLC of its own. Each of the LLCs administered perhaps by the same people, but then if you have a legal problem with one property, it doesn't spread liability to your other properties. That's a serious and legit way of doing real estate business, even though, I mean, if you're a pattern abuser of your tenants, you should be subject to liability across all your properties. But if, for instance, you're a decent human being and you just administer your properties nicely and someone falls down the steps of one of them, they can't sue you for all the rest of them. And that's, I think, pretty legitimate protection. Anyway, maybe that's how they got into it. But here's where we are. The property is owned by a limited liability company that links to an address listed to Hart and his wife, Vicky Hart. Now, Vicky Hart's name I have heard in the past. And I guess the reason being she is a lobbyist with expertise in the healthcare arena. So we probably heard from her in death panel days. Stephen Hart said Vicky Hart co-owns the condo. He said his wife was not the majority owner, but would not identify her partners. I have no ownership interest, he said. Obviously, I know the owners. I'm just not going to tell you. For reasons. It's all on the up and up. I'm just reasons for not telling you. Vicky Hart does no lobbying involving the EPA, her husband said. Her website says she previously worked as a senior health policy advisor for 2 Senate majority leaders before establishing her firm in 2002. Do you need to know who the Senate majority leaders were? I mean, well, that might clear things up. Why don't we just go over and see what's what? I mean, does Vicky Hart have a Wikipedia entry, let's say? Let's go take a look. Victoria Hart. There she is. Oh, and she's also... Oh, no. Okay, so Victoria Hart, is that... no, that would be a California-born English jazz pop singer. So that's a different one. So, yeah, maybe not. Vicky Hart. So, let's see. Vicky Hart, she has a website, right? Does she only say 2 former Senate majority leaders? Would they be Republican majority leaders? I don't know. Heart Health Strategies, not H-E-A-R-T, but H-A-R-T. Heart Health Strategies. I mean, I guess I'm somewhat curious who the former Senate majority leaders are. And I mean, it's certainly possible that they may have been Democrats, and yet you could be kind of an evil healthcare lobbyist anyway. I hold out the possibility that they may have been Democrats only because the article is immediately after this part illustrated with a photo of the Harts posing with now former Congressman John Dingell and Debbie Dingell at a event of some kind, an event at the National Building Museum, whatever. So, you know, they could be into Democratic politics as well and still be evil. It is possible. Let's see, where were we? Stephen Hart served in the Reagan Justice Department and became, according to his website, one of the nation's top fundraisers, donating more than $110,000 to Republican political candidates and committees in the last election cycle. In 2010, the newspaper Roll Call referred to the Harts as a, quote, lobbyist power couple. I guess that's where you get the money to be invested in various LLCs, owning property around Capitol Hill. Mr. Hart is the chairman and CEO of Williams & Jensen, a firm that reported more than $16 million in federal lobbying income in 2017, according to the Center for Responsive Politics. Among his many clients, the NRA, whom he serves as outside legal counsel. Just last year, Cheniere Energy Incorporated, Cheniere, reported paying Hart's firm $80,000. Hart's firm specifically lobbied on, quote, issues related to the export of liquefied natural gas, LNG, approval of LNG exports and export facilities. The firm also lists on its website that it lobbies on other EPA policies like the Clean Air Act, which they're trying to ruin because they mine liquefied natural gas. Let's see. Cheniere Energy Incorporated owned the only active LNG export plant in the United States at the time. Liquid natural gas exports was on the agenda for discussion during Pruitt's December 2017 trip to Morocco for some reason, according to an agency press release. On the trip, Pruitt pitched, quote, the potential benefit of LNG imports on Morocco's economy, the release said. So he wanted to have a vacation to Morocco, and he thought if he did that, he could get the government, I guess, to pay for it if he said, hey, Morocco, how would you like to have some of our liquefied natural gas? The revelations about Pruitt's living situation come as more questions are being raised by members of Congress about his travel habits, like the Morocco trip. The Morocco trip was one of Pruitt's most expensive. ABC News has learned that Pruitt, his head of security, and remember, Pruitt runs with like 25-man security operation, right? And an additional member of his staff, Samantha Dravis, who he just thought he should take to Morocco, all flew first class on the trip. The EPA Inspector General expanded an audit of Pruitt's travel to include the Morocco trip in response to a request from Senator Tom Carper, the ranking Democrat on a committee with oversight of EPA. Carper specifically asked the agency watchdog to look into whether Pruitt's activities on the trip were, quote, in line with EPA's mission to protect human health and the environment. Both environmental groups and members of Congress pointed out that the jurisdiction over liquid natural gas exports typically falls to the Department of Energy, not the EPA. But I guess Rick Perry didn't feel like going to Morocco. Cheniere Energy spokeswoman Rachel Carmichael told ABC News the company ended its relationship with Hart's firm in December of 2017. The spokeswoman went easy on ABC News by telling them the truth. The spokeswoman went on to say that Cheniere was unaware of the relationship. Everybody's unaware of everything. And had not used Hart's firm to have conversations with the EPA. Another lobbying client of Hart's, the railroad Norfolk Southern, spent $160,000 last year on lobbying Congress on issues affecting coal usage, oil production, and transportation, including EPA regulation. Before I move further on this one, just loop back here. The spokeswoman was saying Cheniere Energy was unaware of the relationship, between Hart and Pruitt? Maybe, but to go on to say that we didn't use Hart's firm to have conversations with the EPA. Mind you, the guy went to Morocco to talk about liquid natural gas exports, and Cheniere Energy owns the only LNG export facility in the United States. And they paid them $80,000 for him, and he listed the reason they paid him $80,000 was to lobby the EPA. How could they be unaware of the relationship? You're the only one doing any of this exporting, and the guy goes to Morocco and asks them if they want some exports. That's you. There isn't anybody else. Anyway, then there was, as I said, the Norfolk Southern Railroad people. They declined to comment when reached by ABC News. Morgan, an ethics expert in private practice in Washington, D.C., said the lobbying connection only further muddies the living arrangement. He said the rental agreement could create ethics problems for Pruitt, even if he did reimburse his landlord for rent. What are the terms of the rental agreement? Morgan asked. It's not just a question if he's paying market rent. Was he given the ability to end it immediately? Would someone come after him if he were to not pay the rent? In other words, did he get other sorts of sweetheart provisions besides? If he's paying market rent, fine, but you can't normal people can't just terminate their rental agreements on a moment's notice, but if you get to do that, with no financial penalty, that's kind of a sweetheart deal, et cetera, et cetera. Morgan said the most recent guidance from the Office of Government Ethics emphasized that executive branch officials should decline even a permissible gift if it could cause the public to question their integrity or impartiality. So that went right out the window. EPA spokesman Jahan Jahan Wilcox declined to answer questions about the arrangement. Vicky Hart reached on her cell phone and said she would call back to discuss the matter, but never did. Stephen Hart declined to address details of the rental agreement, saying it was a private matter and up to Pruitt to decide whether they should be made public. The White House has not responded to a request for comment from ABC News. I do have handy, just happened to see this fly by on Twitter, Matthew Miller tweeting about the story from an MSNBC justice and security analyst. That's how we would know him via media. Partner at Via Novo, whatever that may be. Recovering flack from DOJ, DSCC, and many other assignments. Matthew Miller now says, openly, brazenly corrupt. And when we inevitably find out Pruitt took some action to benefit the lobbyist's clients, this will turn into a criminal investigation. He is reacting to the embedded tweet of Jennifer Jacobs, White House reporter for Bloomberg News, who says, Scoop, Scott Pruitt did pay rent for his lobbyist friend's condo, $50 a night, and only on nights when he actually slept there. So, he was a bit better off saying that he Airbnb rented the place from his friend, and even $50 a night would be a sweetheart deal. How do you like that? Jennifer Jacobs says that a colleague of hers, and all I have here is the Twitter handle, so we'll open it up so that we can see who it is. Jennifer, Dlouhy, How does she say that name? Dlouhy. Together, they looked at it for Bloomberg News. White House isn't happy with the EPA's chief handling of this, I'm told. And that's usually the start of the death knell. You get fired when you get to that. Although he's never gotten around to firing Ben Carson over the table. And Scott Pruitt is such an active pro-Trump grifter that I have a difficulty believing Trump is going to get rid of him, and he might not be able to find a better yes man simp for EPA, so he might never get around to firing him. But let's see, Bloomberg, I guess, has those details. $50 a night. Let's take a quick look. EPA, okay, Pruitt's lease, I'll get right to it and we'll abbreviate things the best we can. Pruitt's lease at a Washington apartment owned by, that's a lease? They actually have an agreement. An apartment owned by a lobbyist friend allowed him to pay $50 a night for a single bedroom, but only on the nights he actually slept there. That is pretty sweet. White House officials are growing dismayed about the questions surrounding Pruitt's living arrangement, including his initial inability to produce any documentation about his lease or actual payments, according to 3 officials. The landlord provided EPA officials with a copy of the lease and proof of the payments Pruitt made. By the way, I don't know whether this is normally the case over at the White House, but it probably should be. This White House, forget about it. But I'm wondering whether normally, in a normal operation, you got people on top of this stuff, and you have a full staff, and you got people who you can make it their job to do this thing. But these guys have never filled any of these jobs because they think they're unnecessary as a political matter, or they just don't have anybody in mind, or really they just don't want their people caught in doing things, and the fewer witnesses there are, the better. Less leaks if there's less employees, but it's probably someone's job, someone somewhere, either in the White House or in each of the agencies, coordinated by some umbrella supervisor at the White House, to say, look, after doing this a number of times, 44 times, bringing in people to work in different administrations, in the modern era, we know what sorts of problems can arise. Somebody's job somewhere is, you're a cabinet secretary. Have your people fax to me, or, in the modern era, email it to me. I want to see documentation. It's mundane stuff. But just to make sure that everything's on the up and up and everybody's complying with things and won't cause an ethical problem. For no drama administration, as you might have seen in the Obama administration, have your people send me the paperwork on your living arrangements in Washington, D.C., because we've found that this comes up from time to time. I want to make sure you're counseled correctly, because moving to Washington, if you're an outsider from the American heartland, you can forget that you can fall into any number of traps accidentally by renting from the wrong people, even if you do it up on the up and up, in arm's length and paying full market value, or you buy a house from somebody. You move to Washington, you're a wealthy individual, you're planning on staying in Washington for a while, you go ahead and you buy a nice mansion somewhere because that's what the coal miners wanted you to do. Come to Washington, D.C. and buy a mansion. People do this. Kellyanne Conway went and bought herself a mansion. And you're like, okay, a mansion's a mansion, right? I'll buy this one. Oh, the guy I bought it from, I didn't deal with him. I dealt with his real estate company. I have no idea who it was. He's the biggest Nazi in history. Well, it's hard to be the biggest Nazi in history, isn't it? Biggest American Nazi in American history. The biggest Nazi in history, of course. Okay. We don't really have to name names. I don't want to embarrass anybody by outing them as the biggest Nazi in history. But the answer is Dr. Gay Hitler, DDS, of Ohio. It's the answer. Just a little throwback piece there. They want to figure out in the White House, are you situated properly? If you bought a mansion, do we know who you bought it from? Tell us, keep us up to date on your day-to-day activities like that. It's not for the news. We're not monitoring you. We just want to make sure you don't do something dumb, walk into a trap. There's probably somebody who's on top of that. And you can delegate that. Could the secretary really occupy themselves? Should they be expected to occupy themselves with such minutia? No. You just tell your person, your assistant, they want this information. Farm it out. Get that stuff to them. Somebody over there is going to check it and make sure everything's good. They don't have those people here. And maybe they don't care. And maybe that's why they don't have them. Or maybe they do have them because I got to pay. I have extra money to give out to cronies. I'll give it to that person. I'll make it a no-show job. I think that's what's leading to this sort of stuff piling up. And It would serve them right, certainly. People like Donald Trump and Trump supporters come to this whole proposition like, this is easy. I'll be able to be president. We'll do what I want. You just order stuff to happen. And because you ignore the minutia and including the minutia of hiring competent people to handle minutia for you, you end up falling into pitfall after pitfall after pitfall. And you end up looking like you're an incompetent boob, because you are. But on top of being an incompetent boob, you entered this thing with this sky-high egotistical confidence in yourself that not only could you handle anything, there really isn't even anything to handle. Being president is a breeze. And it's not. It's effing hard. And Donald Trump never believed it. All right. So what's up here? White House officials are growing dismayed because they don't have any paperwork. And it never occurred to anybody that was a problem because they don't know how anything works. Government, media, the world, nothing. These questions follow criticism of Pruitt for traveling first class on airplane flights, right? There was $6,100 payment to use the room in this house. $6,100 spent for approximately 6 months, according to copies of the checks reviewed by Bloomberg. That's a pretty low price. That ain't market rate, I can tell you that. Those checks show varying amounts paid on sporadic dates, not a traditional monthly rent payment of the same amount each month. That's because of the unusual rent schedule. Not a single monthly amount, but a daily amount charged only for days used for a single bedroom in a 2-bedroom unit just blocks from the Capitol. It's like he's running it like a hotel. He is running it like an Airbnb. And he could have done that. He could have done it that way. But not $50. That's not any kind of market rate. And besides, now I have a question. Who's in the other room? Anyway, it better not be the woman who flew to Morocco with him, or they really got a problem. Or else maybe they don't, because YOLO, nothing matters. The owner, actual owner, of course, we learned before, healthcare lobbyist, his wife, Vicky Hart. Let's see, one person familiar with at least compared it, there you go, to an Airbnb-style arrangement, but Pruitt wasn't a transient, although he certainly acts like one, and instead made the apartment his home on nights he was in Washington. The lease, reviewed by Bloomberg, says that he was charged $50 a night based on days of actual occupancy, which of course means you leave all your belongings there and it's not available to anybody else. And every time you show up to use the toothbrush you left there, $50. Bloomberg reviewed 6 canceled checks paid by Pruitt, totaling $6,100. Yada, yada. From March 18th through September 1st, 2017. He paid $450 on March 18th, $900 on April 26th, $850 on May 15th, $700 on June 4th, $1,500 on July 22nd, $1,700 on September 1st. So he's kind of late in making his payments anyway. Justina Few, F-U-G-H, who has been the ethics counsel at EPA for a dozen years, said the arrangement wasn't an ethics issue because Pruitt paid rent. An aide said the agency hadn't reviewed the arrangement in advance because they're incompetent idiots and they never thought to do anything. And Pruitt probably didn't give them any information. The payments covered Pruitt's room in the 2-bedroom unit, but it didn't afford him liberal use of common areas where the owners had dinner parties and other functions, according to a person familiar with the situation. Someone else rented the other bedroom. According to the lease agreement, Pruitt's bedroom could not be locked. Very interesting. It is a weird, stupid, maybe that is a little bit closer to Airbnb, but the rate ain't right. After ABC News reported the living arrangement on Thursday, EPA aides had to seek documentation from the building's owners to prove he paid rent, raising concerns that the White House said two of the people who asked not to be named. Whatever. That's all there is. Pruitt was in Wyoming on Thursday. The disclosure follows revelations about Pruitt's reliance on first-class flights to travel around the globe. Anything else that we didn't learn before? No. More information about J. Stephen Hart, about Vicky Hart, about who they lobby for. Let's see. More of Hart's clients would include the American Automotive Policy Council, Smithfield Foods Incorporated. He's a huge ham lobbyist, I guess. Let's see. Anything else? More mention of the LNG deal. And I think that about wraps it up. So let's see if we can't squeeze in one or two other things here. Ooh, that was one I really meant to get to and give a decent amount of time to. Maybe I'll just give it to you for a weekend reading. I caught my eye that Jonathan Bernstein had written up a piece that mentioned in the title something I like to chime in on every once in a while. Trump embraces constitutional hardball. What's it about? The administration's census decision, which we haven't discussed to this point, but you all know about and probably have all the details necessary. The administration's census decision is the latest example of Republicans straining conventions for partisan ends. So without getting too far into what exactly it was, I think that's probably a proper designation, proper invocation of constitutional hardball, one of our favorite phrases here. We'll include that for you to take a look at over the weekend. And let me close then with this, since I've been reading everybody's comments along the way. Bruce McFarland sent me this Twitter stream of sorts, Twitter, tweet storm about this. He says, I forgot to link you in this side of the brilliant economic policies of our dotard-in-chief. He's got a short tweet storm here about trade that I thought I would toss into the mix before closing things out for the week. The Donald's trade war, he writes, is about reducing the U.S. trade deficit, in particular with China. The Donald's policies will almost inevitably increase the U.S. trade deficit. Interesting. How so? This is based on trade and capital flows, which the Donald does not understand. And I should put to my son, the budding economist, though he be only in high school. I wonder if he would understand this. Trade flows, he says, are part of our total financial flows with the rest of the world. Our total financial flows are pretty much in balance. The way that dollars, quote, come into our economy is that some American who wants to send dollars out hands them over when they do foreign exchange. There are some finicky details, income flows, unrequited transfers, etc. But when we have a trade deficit, most of that is offset by a capital account surplus. And most of the transactions in the foreign exchange markets are capital transactions, not trade transactions. So it is more accurate to say we have a trade deficit because we have a capital account surplus. And a capital account surplus is not a surprise. We give all of our productivity growth to wealthy people, and that is going to lead to a capital surplus. More specifically, they are going to face the risk that something bad happens to the value of U.S. dollars. And they diversify against that risk by buying foreign assets. Oh my goodness, I'm already losing track of this. But this does hang together. Since we are constantly making them wealthier, they have to keep buying foreign assets to stay diversified. And the Donald just signed into law another massive tax subsidy for wealthy people to get even wealthier. Now, if we get a big recession, this could offset the impact of the tax cut. But otherwise, the Donald has already signed us up for an increased trade deficit with China. Wouldn't that be ironic? This is not saying that the trade war will not destroy some people's livelihoods. It's certainly likely to do so. But the end result of the trade war is mostly going to be rearranging our exports and imports while the deficit grows. You'll have to tell me if you were able to follow along. And I get the idea, generally speaking, which is to say this stuff is complicated and there's no chance in the world that Donald Trump understands it. And there's really, honestly, very little chance that I'd be able to repeat it back to you accurately. But I wanted to thank Bruce for taking the time to put that together and sharing it with us. And since we were sharing so many user comments, I thought it only fair to go back and fish that one out for you to chew on over the weekend. And now, of course, time for me to give you some other, or at least point you to other things to chew on for the weekend. If we didn't get to it, you know that Justice will over on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And if I start now, we'll have plenty of time to actually tell you about what's coming up on the show. Here we go, starting off in the Bistro Cafe, as he likes to call it. Former U.S. Acting Solicitor General Neil Katyal slams Trump's former lawyer John Dowd for dangling out there the pardons as mind-blowingly stupid. Yeah, we didn't even get to that. Apparently it was Dowd that floated the idea of pardoning Flynn and Manafort and others just to get out from underneath the investigation. Then, on the rest of the menu, an 18-year-old in Bellevue, Washington, I know we didn't get to this one, has been arrested for setting fire to a local mosque. the second time that mosque has been burned since January of last year. Wow. Far-right conspiracy theorist Laura Loomer is kicked out of the Pulse nightclub shooting trial. They love getting kicked out of places. Why do you hate the First Amendment? Why are you doing... I wonder what you do. We'll find out on the show. And the FBI started looking into Trump's shady Russia-linked business deals as early as 2014. Not a huge surprise. Of course, after the break, they'll move on to the chef's table, where they get the really esoteric stuff. This time, Trump is gaslighting the public, and you can see it in the way he fires cabinet members. That's relevant. And Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo wasted no time calling NFL star Michael Bennett's morally corrupt, but he's strangely quiet on police brutality. How odd. More after
From
this.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Yes, thanks very much for listening. By the way, all of this last half hour of the show are reminding me of a tweet storm by Adam Davidson that I'll include for your review about the way the Trump organization worked and the way it cut its shady deals and why the left hand never knows what the right hand is doing. We'll be back with something on Monday.